It is the 20th of November, 2015, and this is episode 34 of the Unseen Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Carr, and tonight I would like to point out that we have followed up a bit on last week's podcast where we talked about asteroid mining on the WOW signal. So please go to wowsignalpodcast.com. There you'll find a short episode called A Burst. And in the burst, I talk about some of my questions following up on last week. So that's wowsignalpodcast.com. To learn more about the Unseen Podcast, go to unseenpodcast.com. There we have links to everything, including all our panelists' bios and photos and so on. Tonight, we have with us Marsha Barnhart.
Hello, good to be here again.
And from Poland, Mateusz Macias.
Hello, guys. It's nice to finally be here again.
Yeah, good to have you back. And from England, Adam Smith.
Hey, guys. Lovely to be back here again on the Unseen Podcast.
Hey.
Now, you might know Adam as Adam Synergy on Google+. But since there's about 5,000 Adam Smiths per square foot on Google+, he chose Synergy to try to get a little bit of identity. So tonight, guys, the subject is future transportation, and not distant future, but near future. Some of the things that are popping up on the horizon already. You want to start with the Hyperloop? Why don't you give us what you know about that, Adam?
Well, back in 2012, 2013, Elon Musk, well-known CEO of SpaceX, publicly introduced the idea of a Hyperloop, which he described as being a cross between a rail gun and an air hockey table. And he introduced the idea because at the time, the state of California, the government in the state of California, were talking about building a new high-speed bullet train to run between LA and San Francisco. And he proposed that instead of spending the money on a bullet train, they built a Hyperloop, which is a system, well, basically it's a large tube, an evacuated tube, which would carry capsules levitated on magnets through the tube at incredibly high speeds, something like around 760 miles an hour, which would do the journey from LA to San Francisco. That's about 400 miles. And he said that it would do the journey in around 35 minutes. And so he basically invited engineers and scientists to expand upon the idea and come up with a realistic design. And they have done. Scientists and engineers at UCLA in particular have done a lot of work designing what they feel to be a realistic working model of a Hyperloop. There's a test track for the Hyperloop being built out somewhere in Texas. I can't remember exactly where, but they're building a test track for it in Texas, and the plan is to go ahead and build the real thing in California, if they get permission, beginning the end of 2017, 2018. So, well, we'll see. But it looks like it is going to happen. There's a lot of work needs doing, a hell of a lot of work needs doing. They need to design not only the tube, pylons to lift it off the ground, the capsules, the seats, the stations, the whole system, a new digital ticketing system. So there's a lot of work, and the main barrier is going to be money, as ever. It's going to come down to cost. But the cost estimates are considerably lower than it would be to build the bullet train. California does need some form of new mass transportation system. It's one of the most heavily populated places on the planet, and they suffer from really bad traffic jams, congestion. There's too many cars on the road, so they do need a practical way of getting people from A to B. So the Hyperloop.
One of California's, Adam,
Go on, Marsha.
I was going to say one of California's big problems is they don't have any money. So good luck building that, for one thing.
Well,
you got to have money to build that.
You're quite right. The answer to where the money is going to come from is crowdfunding. That's how they propose to pay for it. There's a company called Jumpstart Fund, which has been formed by a guy called Dirk Ahlborn, Ahlborn. Ahlborn. He's formed a company called Jumpstart Fund, specifically to fund the Hyperloop Transportation Technologies, which is the name of the company that he proposes will build this Hyperloop. And details of exactly how much money is raised through this Jumpstart Fund are pretty sketchy. I don't think he's announced exactly how much money he's got to play with, but it seems that they have enough to build the test track and test out the technologies for a start.
Now,
so that's basically where we are at the moment.
Now, these evacuated tunnels, Adam, would they be above ground or underground?
They'd be above ground on concrete pylons.
I see.
They're proposing to build, to save space on land, instead of taking up lots of land like a rail track would do, or a road. The whole thing will be lifted off the ground by concrete pylons.
And it's going they're going to shoot through this tube at nearly the speed of sound, like 700 plus miles an hour. Wow.
Yeah. But strangely, they say that once you're in the capsule, you'll feel the force of acceleration initially,
right,
but you don't feel any sense of motion until you come to a stop. That's the only time you would feel any sort of sensation of movement. Sounds a bit counterintuitive, but apparently that's the way it is. Because you're levitated.
Now, I've seen...
Go on.
Yes,
I was going to say, I've seen artist renditions, and it seems to be that these are in individual tubes, like a person per tube, but if this is technologically feasible, do you think they're going with individual tubes, or are they going to go with a large tube structure, which is analogous to trains at this point, where multiple people are on a large structure traveling, and they can walk aisles and be, given a drink and a little bit of food to eat.
Yeah.
But the model that I've seen has 28 seats per capsule. So you'd have 28 people in each capsule, strapped into each in a seat, very similar to an aircraft, what you'd find in something like the Concorde jet. Something like that.
It reminds me a bit of what the banks used, to send
pneumatic tubes.
Yeah, the pneumatic tubes. Yeah, exactly.
New York City had one in the 1930s. New York City had what was the first pneumatic tube public transportation system in the 30s, and it really was. You pop a bunch of people in there, suck out, then whoosh, there they go. So this is just like a highly, highly sophisticated version of that, I'm assuming.
I think they have
It's not a new idea.
Okay, go ahead, Mateusz.
Yeah, I think they have to make some few capsules rather than one big capsule because it's for the safety reasons. Because it's I think less work to make it safe for like a small capsule even from 8 to 28 people, then rather than the huge capsule for more than 100 people.
Right. And at those speeds, you could spread them out by several miles, and you could stop if you'd have enough time to stop if somebody had a problem up ahead. Yeah. I mean, the engineer. I agree.
It doesn't make sense to have it above ground. It doesn't make sense to have it above ground there, especially in. To me, it seems like it would be best to have it just below the surface, and
Marsha,
it would be less.
Marsha, it will the pylons will actually keep it absorb the shocks, eventual shocks, because I think if we put it in the ground, any possible earthquake or something like that would be danger.
I see. I was going to ask about that. California's earthquake prone.
The other reason that it's going to be above ground is because it's going to be solar powered. The whole thing will be powered by silver solar array above the tube. So, yeah, it will be powered by solar power, which of course you wouldn't get underground. So it's got to be above ground.
That's interesting. So now you could build one that would go. I mean, right now it takes about 5 hours to fly from New York to Los Angeles. So you could actually, with a little bit more experience, you could build one that went that far, and be more like about 4 hours. But still, I mean, I can see the challenges of building something like that. You have to cross rivers. You have to cross a lot of populated areas. But still, I mean, it seems like a lot more convenient than air travel.
Do you think that system is better than the maglev system that's going to be built in Israel? It's going to be about 20 feet above the ground, and it's maglev, and it sounds a similar thing here. It's a monorail type thing suspended above ground. That's another approach, and probably there will be multiple approaches. There will be multiple platforms in the future. It's not going to be an all one fits. So that's also going to be viable. It's already being built. It's not.
Maglev actually. Maglev, I think Maglev actually runs in Japan now.
They do have maglev trains, yes.
Yeah. So it's actually tested technology.
Yeah.
But it's still slower than Hyperloop.
Well, the problem with these an open air train is it takes a lot of energy to go that fast. If you have an evacuated tube, even if it's only partially evacuated, the energy requirements drop dramatically, and you can just it should be a lot cheaper to operate. And if it's solar powered or even partially solar powered, you get. Because it doesn't take much energy to push something through vacuum at all. In fact, it's basically free if it's.
What will these tubes? What will the tubes be made of, you guys? What will the construction? What is the material of these tubes?
I'm not actually sure whether they're going to use carbon fiber or some sort of just steel tube, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think it would be something. You want it to be something pretty light and easy to manufacture. So it would be, I don't know. It could be lots of things.
And something that it would be malleable yet structural.
It has to be very strong.
It's got to be able to give. Yeah.
Well, it's got to be able to take the air pressure outside of it, which is about almost 15 pounds per square inch, which it's a lot of force pressing on it. It's got to be pretty strong.
Nanotechnology is around the corner, so maybe in a few years, maybe they develop technology to build, the structure with the nanotechnology.
Yeah, very highly engineered materials, yes, which would be engineered at the nano level, which could be transparent, and still very strong, and still contain solar cells, and have a lot of that. We're going to get better and better at that. Right now, we're in very early days, but yeah, carbon nanotubes are extremely strong, and in fact, carbon nanotubes have been put forward as the candidate material for a space elevator, which would be, have tremendously high strength requirements, and because just the sheer weight of the thing, and the you could, with a little bit of additional nanotechnology, you could do all kinds of things with those kind of materials. You could have windows. You could have all kinds of. You're going to have a lot of engineering going into this kind of thing. But back in the 19th century when they started building trains, there was a lot of engineering, and they did it. It was difficult because they didn't have computers. They didn't have. All they had basically was iron to work with, and they still managed to pull it off.
Right. Yeah, materials technology and developments in the science of materials is going to be really important going forward, because it has to be light, it has to be strong, it has to be, in many cases, conductive. So there's an awful lot of technology in that just now coming to the fore, too. That's going to make a big difference. I've been reading about frictionless kinds of what they call frictionless, no moving parts, motors and engines. Have you guys read much about that? And this, they're talking about a case of where, I don't know if this is going to be in the next 20 years or something, but from what I read, it's binary power, they call it, where converging light is striking and creating some sort of power from that. Have you heard? What do you know about that?
Well, the Hyperloop has to eliminate friction, and it does that by using a system of what they call air bearings, where the capsule will be suspended within the tube so that it's not touching the tube on a cushion of air. And the main challenge for the engineers is to overcome something called the Cantrevitz limit, which is an effect where you get a pocket of air in front of the capsule, slowing it down. And so these capsules in the Hyperloop have a system of fans sucking the air from in front of the capsule. It kind of pulls the air out the way, and that allows the capsule to speed down the tube. I'm not that familiar with all the engineering concepts. I'm not sure exactly how it's going to stop, for example. I've not read into how it decelerates from 760 miles an hour to come to a stop at the station, but I'm sure they've worked it out.
Well, I think you just put some air in front of it.
Let's hope so.
And it'll stop pretty smoothly. I mean.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's got.
And also, you can maglev can stop too, right? Maglev trains have brakes, so.
Yeah. I would assume it's not going to come to a full stop in one jolt. That would be a hell of a jolt, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would. No, you could do it. I think you could do it pretty smoothly. The only thing that really concerned me about Hyperloop, I mean, I think it's a wonderful thing to give a shot to, but can they really build those tracks for a competitive cost? And that's really going to be the question. I mean, here in the United States, Amtrak has never made money, even though it only runs on the most populated routes. And part of the problem is that the Western United States is very sparsely populated, except on the coast. And these long routes that run through the entire country don't pick up many passengers as they go along. So, there are issues that are part of this. Amtrak is has never really been forced to survive on its own, but we've
historically though didn't. I mean, the railways in the United States played a very big part in the 19th century in opening up the interior.
Well, in terms of freight, yes, certainly, cattle, freight, materials, going on rail, and that still makes money now. That they're still doing that.
Yeah, the rail system transports most of our goods in the United States, and it makes a real handsome living. But transporting people, I think the problem is that Americans fell in love with their private transportation and their cars, and Europe did not fall in love with their cars. They fell in love with their transportation system, their mass transportation system. We have two different kinds of systems, but we cannot get Amtrak to make a buck
it's cheaper
without subsidies.
It's cheaper for two people to rent a car, not their own car, rent a car and drive from New York to DC than it is to buy tickets for Amtrak.
Right.
And Amtrak still loses money.
And in addition, and the thing is, you're never captive to having to go where everybody else is going. You can stop and get off, and you can make side tracks. That's another thing Americans are in love with, their individual ability to do what they want to do without following the train, literally.
Yeah, and then we
have a hard time mass transportation here.
And when you get to New York, you're fine, right? But because New York, they have the subways, you have it's easy to get around there. But DC, well, the metro's pretty good, but anywhere outside the metro, as you know, you need a car, and so it's not easy to use Amtrak now. But if you couple Amtrak or whatever Hyperloop to say an on-demand autonomous car. You've got a system that Americans could love. I mean, we do love our choices, right?
Yeah, this is the thing I was going to talk about, the psychology of mass transportation. And, back in the 1940s, most of the cities, Baltimore was one of them, DC was another, Atlanta, all of these had a very robust mass transportation system within the entire large city grid, and they got dismantled and put away when cars became so cheap to own, and we never went back. So how is a mass transportation system going to get reticent travelers like we Americans back in the saddle again?
I don't know. I mean, we built the interstate highway system. Well, we built the interstate highway system, and it's so easy to just get on that system and go anywhere in America. That we kind of built ourselves into painted ourselves into a corner there.
And that's the reason that it's going to be hard to get enough money to build a mass transit system, because most of Americans don't care about a mass transit system. Isn't that weird?
Well, it's not weird. I mean, they don't need it, right? I mean, and we have airplanes to go. I mean, the thousands of miles that we have to go to get it anywhere, significant.
They should build this thing in Europe, Adam. If they want to make a go of it, what they should do is build that system in the Hyperloop. It would go in Europe.
I think it's going to get built all over the world. I can see it taking off because of the pressure on people's time these days.
Guys,
there's such pressure on people to be at a certain place at a certain time, and people are a lot busier nowadays than they were.
My main concern about Hyperloop is safety, people's safety, because it's they want to eliminate friction, and if something happens in the way, if how it's very difficult times now. If some people, organizations want to blow things up, or even vandalism happens. If something happens and just the friction appears, what's going to happen with the tube, with the people driving there?
Yeah.
Imagine imagine tube traveling at 760 miles an hour, and something happens. Even not even people, doing stuff like that. Even weather or earthquake. What will happen with the people if they make it safe, very very safe? Then it will just start in Europe, in rest of the world, in Asia.
Well, yeah.
And then we'll kick off.
That same concern was voiced with the bullet train in Tokyo when they started that. I mean, that area sitting on the Kanto Plain is very earthquake prone. And I know I was over there when they were working with that, and there was a lot of concern about safety. If you're taking a bullet train and you have an earthquake and there goes your rails. But you know what? I do not recall any catastrophe at all with that bullet train, even as prone as that area is with earthquakes. Somehow they managed to engineer it so that it was safe and quick and on time and made a profit. So it can be done, but I'll tell you, certain places only.
Marsha, a few days ago, bullet train from France, TGV, is actually derailed.
Uh-huh.
I think few people died. And a few years earlier, I think a bullet train in Madrid, in Spain, derailed. But that time, actually, I think more than 100 people died.
Yeah, but there's a big difference.
And it wasn't human error.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
It was human error. Yeah.
The big difference.
The guy was actually going too fast.
Yes, They need to engineer these things so that you take the human element out of it, much like they want to do these smart cars now. Take the human element out of it, and you can build in safety like we can't even imagine.
And that's exactly what they're proposing with the Hyperloop. It removes the human element, it removes the human driver, the whole thing's computer controlled. Mm-hmm. There's zero chance of human error.
Right. Before we go any further, I'd like to introduce Nick Nielsen, who's since we started
from Portlandia.
Hello.
Hi, Paul. Hi, everyone else.
Hi, Nick. Okay. Nick, jump in. We're, as you can probably figure out, we're talking about Hyperloop right now. And whether Hyperloop would take up easier in Europe or Asia than it would in the US, but
I think people all over the world are generally skeptical about new technologies, especially technologies that they don't fully understand. If someone doesn't fully understand how something works, and they're told, we're going to shoot you through a tube at 760 miles an hour, they're going to be worried.
But we already get it. We get on airplanes all the time and go 600 miles an hour through the sky, and very few of us get killed doing that.
But there was an enormous mistrust of the automobile when it first came on the scene back in the early 1900s.
And those are the least safe. That's the least safe mode of transportation we have, right? I mean, we die in cars more than we die in airplanes.
People speculated that trains would never take off because people would be suffocated by a lack of air as soon as the train got over 30 miles an hour. It's true, they did. Well,
they also said rockets couldn't operate in space because there's nothing to push against. But
exactly.
So what you're saying is, if you build it, they will come. Is what you're saying, Adam?
Yes.
But it
Yes.
kind of depends on how it's marketed, because if the system is
that's
well
everything.
marketed and it appeals to people, it's just like the difference between deciding to build a bus line and deciding to build a light rail system in a city in the U.S. Buses are associated with crime and poverty, whereas if train stations can be kept clean and they look slick and modern, then people feel much more comfortable with them, and you can get the upper quartiles of the income bracket to ride a light rail train, but you'd be almost impossible to get them to ride a bus system into town for commuting.
That's true. I mean,
right.
So a lot of it is image, and image is taken care of by marketing. Unfortunately, we could all wish it was.
That's one of the things I told Paul I thought was interesting about this topic, because there's the psychology science called the theory of planned behavior, and psychologists use that to move people into mass transportation, and that takes so much psychology, at least to move Americans into feeling good about choosing consistently mass transportation, that they work overtime on how to make the mind want to accept that and feel good about that. And you're right, how many stops they have to take and what parts of the city a person has to go through to get from point A to point B. That's all things that cause Americans anyway to be reticent about mass transportation. They would be here much more apt to adopt a individual maglev transportation thing than they would mass transportation. But they got scientists working on how to get your mind to do this very thing we're talking about.
Well,
like you point out, though, that the individualism in the U.S. is very important. And yes, people would be much more likely to patronize a system that was based on individual vehicles and based on mass transit. There would be a certain percentage of people in highly urbanized areas that could be persuaded to use mass transit in the form of trains and the like. But individualized transportation is important in the U.S. But the U.S. is only a very small fraction of global population, so anything that can be adapted to the enormous cities of Eurasia will take the bulk of the transportation business in the coming century.
Yeah. Well, anybody who's ever tried to drive downtown in D.C., and Marsha, you know about this, right? On a busy day, understands why the metro has its has its virtues, right?
Draw.
So I do not go into DC. I live near DC, and I do not go there in my car. I will not drive, except for maybe Georgetown, but other than that, I won't do it.
For Mel and I living in Baltimore, Paul, we never took mass transportation because it would cost twice as much and take far longer to get in there using the mass transportation system that it was for us to pop into our turbo Beetle bug and drive into Washington, D.C. from the Baltimore area. But I know an awful lot of people who use mass transportation, but it isn't be-all, end-all for an awful lot of people. You took the train, we always drove.
Yeah, well, I take my kids to DC, which I do frequently. We to a museum or whatever. We get on the train. The kids love it, and you get to see all the graffiti. And okay, before we go any further, I'd like to note that Mike Bohler has joined us. Hello, Mike.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, actually,
hello, Mike.
Hello. Talking about public transportation, I could tell you horror stories about trying to get around Chicago. Okay. I kind of missed out a little bit there, but Chicago is not designed. If you live in a suburb and you want to go to a suburb to use public transportation, if you're going to use public transportation, you're using it to get downtown Chicago. And one time I tried to figure out how I can get from when I'm not on a field assignment. I would have to go from Joliet to Downers Grove, which is a 30-mile drive. If I were to take public transportation, it would be a 2-hour drive or 2-hour trip from my house to the office, just one way. and that's if I can catch enough buses and stuff to do it. But because there's been talk about a light rail that was supposed to connect some of the western or the suburbs, and actually my town's supposed to be on the list to be on the analysis for that. They're trying to they're looking at reusing some old freight rail, the old Elgin, Joliet, and Western Railroad tracks to set up a light rail that would connect all the western suburbs. But that's been going on now for about 20 years. And considering that it's been 40 years now, or about 30 years, they've been talking about an airport in Piatone, Illinois, which would be kind of southeast of me. And they haven't even broke ground on anything for that. Trying to get any type of transportation built in Illinois is next to impossible.
Why is that, do you think?
Well, the Piatone, that there's a lot of politics involved with that, because it's right on the edge between Cook County, which is a very it's beside politically.
Don't you mean Crook County?
Crook County, yeah.
Am I right? Am I right in thinking in Chicago you have a big north-south divide?
That's a fair statement. Most of if you were to superimpose the interstates of Chicago and the Metra rail system, it's everything radiates into Chicago, so there's kind of there's definitely a north-south split as far as trying to like for me to try to get to the north of Chicago, you have to make any good time, you have to go through downtown. It's like almost sort of, it's like that's just how it's built, and like I said, they don't want.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say that because there is such a different way of looking at this from the European-centric view and the U.S. and the American-centric view, you would be more apt to get a mass transportation going in America, in my opinion, if you had these little, and I've been reading a lot about this, makes sense, all these little smart car type things that individuals own. And they can get to the grocery store and to the college campus and that type of thing on their own in their own little individualized unit. Then the mass transportation aspect would come in when you would come to a particular area and pull your little smart car up and dock up on this area, connected in some manner magnetically, or probably not physically, but you would connect in some manner with a bunch of other individuals who were going in one designated area. And that would be a workable mass transit solution, the way the USA psyche works. I've still got my little car, but I can get mass transportation, and then at a point in time I can uncouple and still be in my little pod car and go somewhere. If we could figure out something that would work like that, and they've got that on the board now, I think Google Cars is working with that. You hook up on the highway or some other system, you connect, you all give up control of your car, you sit there and have your tea and you read the Wall Street Journal, and you go conveyed autonomously for a period of time and then uncouple, and then you're on your own. I wish that is the model we went for. That would work here.
Tesla.
This other system, I think, is.
Tesla did the same thing.
What's that?
Tesla did the same thing. I think just a few weeks ago.
The Tesla car?
Yeah, exactly. It just drives autonomously.
Oh, yeah. That's,
Apple.
There was a case of driving from one coast of US to another one just by, having your hands off the wheel.
yeah, it has a hands off mode.
That,
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, that makes sense because we can use the existing infrastructure. We don't have to put a lot of money into this concrete structure that we have to build. You'd use the existing highway, and the cars are the things that's smart. The surface doesn't matter. That's where I think is a good, workable, near solution for us.
But if you could do 700 miles an hour, I mean, you would be
You
willing
could.
to
You
make
could in
that
these
compromise.
things.
You'd be willing to say, okay, I'll sit with strangers for 2 hours while I'm going a long distance.
Who's to say,
we're
Paul,
talking-
that you couldn't do that 700-mile-an-hour thing?
Yeah, but we're talking about two different paradigms of travel. You're talking about inner city commuting and city to suburban commuting on the one
True.
hand, and on the other hand, you're talking about intercity transportation.
Yeah,
Now, something like a Hyperloop would be great to go from Vancouver to BC to San Diego in a few hours.
Right.
But
or intercountry.
Yeah, or intercountry if you can get the agreements to do it, and then the kind of system that Marsha's been describing would be wonderful for a large U.S. city, and they're two different things, and there's no reason that you don't want one type of transportation. You want multiple transportation networks for redundancy in case there's a problem with one.
Multimodal.
I remember the first time I went to Prague, how impressed I was that there is an underground subway and an above ground tram system and a bus system and a light rail system. So you've got multiple kinds of mass transit within a single city, and it gives you a lot of different options. And if one doesn't work, another will be working.
Yeah, but the very mature cities like Prague or New York tend to have better transportation than the newer cities like Chicago.
And that's one of the reasons you find European cities have such great mass transit networks, is because they're older and they've had time to build it. Portland, where I live, has been doing a great job of building out a light rail system and a trolley system in the downtown area, and it's great for what it does, but it's very limited in terms of its interconnections. And I'm sure if you came back in 100 years and you had all kinds of a ring system and a radiating spoke system all interconnected together, then you can get wherever you want, and that's what most European cities have now.
Mm-hmm. I used to live in London in UK, and they have one of the oldest underground net. So it's been for more than from the beginning of the 20th century. So basically, if you go to underground, you can get probably anywhere in London. You can even go to the 3 London airports. So it's quick, it's very convenient, and they had time to make it possible.
Yeah, and they also got bombed to hell in the 40s, so they had to rebuild everything.
But the underground stayed good.
Yeah, they did. It's true. They saved a
lot
of lives
system,
getting down
it
underground.
Survived.
Yeah.
It was the above ground stuff that got bombed. Yeah, subterranean, I think, is a really good way to go. I think subterranean is better to go than it is overhanging off some concrete pylon, to me. But
for short distances, but the cost of that is per mile is quite high.
Also, the geomorphological challenges of trying to build a long range thing underground, where the Earth is going to shift over time, and you'd be much better in terms of maintenance having it above ground.
Right, that's true. Yeah.
And solar power.
Well, they have these systems. The Department of Defense and their associated industries have already a capability of tunneling distances, tunnel stuff that melts rock into a viscous material that just kind of squirts around itself. There's a technology easy enough to burrow holes right through the earth.
I've worked on that equipment. I actually have seen tunneling equipment like that. And even though it is not, what Marsha is saying is correct, the geology is the big key, because I know that this company I was working for actually lost this equipment. It's sitting under Lake Calumet in Chicago because there was a undetected sand deposit, and they tunneled into it. It was supposed to be all limestone. The ceiling collapsed. The tunnel filled with sand. About $1 million of equipment is sitting under Lake Calumet because of it wasn't a mistake on the geologist.
Geologist's error.
Not even that. They just never knew it was there. All the testing and stuff like that said it was all supposed to be rock, but there just happened to be this. It was, like Illinois, there's a lot of glacial deposits, so there's spots where there is glacial sand under the ground that kind of like a sinkhole, and that's what they ran into.
But Mike, you could say you could say the same thing, Mike, for above ground. If it's built on sand that is, when an earthquake hits, what's that called? Subductive or
right? But that could be adjusted.
There goes your pylon.
Well, not working with civil. If they ran into something like that, they have ways of they can back or pump in concrete. They could turn that sand into concrete if they needed to, or they can do all sorts of stuff. So it's there is. That's why there's cost overruns, because they do run into stuff like that. So it's not.
The big dig in Boston, which was just ridiculous, right? It cost a fortune.
Yeah. So it's.
But it employs a large number of people at high wages for long periods of time, so there's an incentive for cost overrun.
Yeah, but we already have the Department of Defense for that. So.
But they don't have a corner on the market.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
Now let's talk a little bit about autonomous cars. That seems to be something that's going to happen even sooner than Hyperloop, I would think. In fact, as someone who has a daughter who's about to learn to drive, I've been hoping for autonomous cars for some time now. And I have an 11-year-old too. I'm hoping that in 5 years, maybe he won't have to learn to drive. But, can we really make that transition? What's going to happen?
It's happening now.
Well, partly we're actually doing it.
That'll be simple.
The new Mercedes-Benz,
but it's not mass transportation.
No, it's not.
But it can be integrated with mass transit, like in the system that Marsha was describing earlier. If every vehicle has the computerization equipment on board and the automatic driving equipment on board and the transponders needed to communicate with other vehicles, you could space vehicles on the roadway very closely and run them at a high rate of speed and have it be quite efficient if it was managed all by computers.
Yeah, well, look at Uber. I mean, Uber, which right now has human drivers, is looking to go to autonomous cars. You basically have an app on your phone. You say, I need to go from here to there, and the autonomous car shows up. You don't own the car. You just pay a certain fixed fee for going from one place to another. And Uber is going to be a big driver. That I know. As we mentioned earlier, Tesla is working on limited autonomy right now, sort of a autopilot and sort of a glorified cruise control, plus parallel parking. But beyond, I mean, you get to the point where there's not even any controls at all in the car except for take me from here to there, right? And that could happen soon.
Yes, it can happen soon, but
Yeah.
it will eventually reduce driving to a minority activity that's only pursued by enthusiasts. And it's also going to profoundly affect the transportation industry, which is currently experiencing a severe driver shortage because driver wages aren't as high as they need to be, and not many people want to live that over the road life. And even though, as I pointed out to many other people in the industry, because I earn my living in the transportation industry, it's going to be a very long time before an autonomous vehicle can make it through a mountain pass on a snowy night. Still, the large sections of flat, straight roads throughout large parts of the world, if you can have an autonomous vehicle drive 24 hours a day, 7 days a week without taking rest breaks, restroom breaks, or having to eat or sleep, the economics of this is so overwhelming that it will transform the industry as it becomes a robust and reliable system.
Right. And even if there's a few
Yeah.
edge cases that are hard to deal with, right, you just shut down for those few hours where you can't go through that.
Google
I
Car
think
website.
I think go, Adam.
I was just going to say that there's a statistic I saw on Google Car's website. 94% of all accidents are caused by human error. So if you eliminate
Oh, I believe that. Yeah.
94%,
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
then that's
Now,
the thing. The problem comes with the other 6%. It's how do you get autonomous vehicles to deal with the snap decisions where a driver has to choose between running over a child, say, or crashing into someone's house.
Well,
It's things like that
Thinking
that are going to be difficult.
I mean, how do humans handle that kind of thing? Do we handle it
AI
particularly well?
operation.
Well, yeah, but I mean, let's say, does a human handle that kind of situation well? I'm not convinced we do.
That
We
becomes
already
very
know
interesting.
that humans don't handle it well.
No, they don't handle it well, but this is
'Cause
very
that-
similar to a very famous thought experiment in ethics about having to choose between pushing somebody off of a bridge when you have to do it yourself and pulling a lever where you don't have to do it yourself, but saving 5 people by killing one or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
And
That's
this is
a
a very-
famous ethics quandary.
Yeah.
By the way, Zach Weinersmith recently did a really funny cartoon on that, which I will have a link to in the show notes. Go ahead. Yeah, well, I mean, you can get in ethical quandaries, but that where you have less than a couple of seconds to make your decision. Do we want to decide in advance how that gets handled and then let a machine do it, or do we want to, under stress, figure out, make a difficult ethical choice? I don't know. I think I might go with the machine.
People are
I
unpredictable.
would too. The machines are going to learn that. They're going to learn that over time, just like my computer email system knows over time. It learns what's spam and what isn't. These systems will learn that. They'll be engaged to learn that. People will be working overtime to build into them that type of ethical quandary operation.
But instead of saying it like Asimov's first law, you can't harm a human. It has
A
more like
person can look at someone else and realize in an instant that person is drunk. Avoid that person. They look crazy. A computer has a lot of difficulty with that sort of decision, and those are the sorts of decisions that autonomous vehicles are going to have to try and deal with. People are very good at interpreting hand signals, say from pedestrians, saying, someone can, with a wave of the hand, say, I am going to step into the road.
or just the body language of how you stand at a corner tells you whether you're going to whether you're going to stop or go, right?
But the thing about these autonomous cars, you guys,
Actually, you
It
know what?
doesn't have to think. It's just going to see the behavior. And if you step into the road, then it doesn't matter if you're stoned or straight. If you step into the road, that behavior is going to trigger this action by the smart car. In an instant, it can go,
Well,
Yeah,
that,
but you and I,
well, I would say
you
that
and
would
I,
be that's the I mean I think that would be the because you can just tell the computer, hey, object moving this direction, potential collision, we you know stop, swerve, whatever.
the
To
computer tells you.
right, or
Right.
even with an autonomous
The
car, it
computer's
can
going to do that far faster than we can.
yeah, and I think that would I mean trying to decide if the person is drunk or not, that's not important. It's the fact that he's going to, two objects
No.
can't occupy the same space. So if I'm, if I'm the computer, I'm saying that object is getting in my way. I have brake or do whatever. I can automatically do things because I'm also have to tell other cars behind me, hey, I am hitting my brakes, blah, blah, blah. So everything starts reacting at once. Trying to decide, is that person going to step in the road? You don't know. But since the computer, if it's scanning all the time, it's knowing that object is moving in front. Automatic, do this. Go into this
Right.
subroutine and
Yeah.
do this.
And it has multiple systems. Multiple systems are detecting movement all the way around it. We don't have a 360 view in our head, but these smart cars will have multiple systems constantly wandering around your zone and detecting all these problems. I think all these things are going to get worked out as we move along the timeline on this technology. It's going to kind of work itself out, I think.
about insurance. Who's liable for an accident in an autonomous vehicle?
Good point.
I don't know the answer to that.
I don't
question.
think there's the answer.
Well, I think that's something that has to get worked out.
Is the manufacturer of the car?
I'll tell you what they're going to do.
responsible?
They're going to determine the last time you did your required updates. And if you didn't do your required updates exactly when you were supposed to and you had an accident, I'll bet you then you are going to be held liable. But if you show, and you'd have like this little, when you get an inspection with your car, you have this paperwork. So you show the insurance company, I did all my updates exactly when I was supposed to. They were registered. So you are going to pay the bill on me hitting this cow. And if I didn't have stamped registered updates, then I'll pay for hitting the cow.
Well,
Personal responsibility.
It's going to get sorted out in the court system ultimately, because there's all kinds of reasonable scenarios you can come up with, but there's always going to be people who are going to try to get out of their liability, no matter how reasonably it's framed to them, and so it'll go and get litigated, and then the precedent law will end up shaping that.
Right now we have chips in our car that tell us whether or not we were speeding when we had an accident, and that legally they have the person that's suing you has a right to see that. When it comes right down to it, you were going 25 miles past the speed limit when you hit my car, ergo, you're going to be at fault. And it says right here in this chip, and there's no more discussion, pay your fine, go away, and be a better human being.
I think there will be guidelines when you buy a self-driving car. They will tell you have to be always awake, and if you see danger, you have to react. Because in those self-driving cars, you can take over the wheel and you can actually do something with it. And I think most of the cases will be the driver will be liable because why didn't you react properly?
Well,
You saw the danger and you didn't react. I think most of the cases will be, the driver will be liable.
But you have to remember that though we're talking about in the U.S. There's a very large number of deaths every year from human error, in driving cars and drunk drivers as well. And you take that away, you've greatly reduced the number of deaths and injuries is resulting in car accidents. So, you're talking about a good problem to have, right?
Cars kill a lot of people every day.
Oh, yes. Yes. And I've known people that have died in car accidents or been injured in car
Hundreds.
accidents. And most of us do.
Yeah.
And
one of the things that was brought up was how much safer it's going to be for motorcyclists when you have smart cars on the road, because those cars are going to be able to detect a motorcycle quicker than a driver does. That's proven. People all the time run over and kill motorcyclists, and they say, my God, I never even saw the guy, but a car is going to see you. That's one thing the motorcycle magazines are touting right now, that when smart cars are driven by computers and managed by systems that think far quicker and react far quicker than the human, motorcyclists are going to be a lot safer on the road. And I don't know but what that's probably going to turn out to be accurate.
Could be. Of course, there'll probably be too many motorcyclists then they'll be killing each other. I don't know.
No, see, like for a motorcyclist, a car making a left turn is the most likely chance you're going to get into an accident, because the person making the left turn is not
going across traffic.
Yeah. And
unless you're in the UK, and then it's the right turn.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly.
Or Japan.
Oh, you had to say that, didn't you?
Yeah.
Well,
Japan, right?
Yeah, that's a true statement. Yeah, but it's I mean, when I took my motorcycle safety course, always be wary of drivers making left turns, because they don't see you. So, so if you have something that's monitoring your left, while you're making that turn, because you're making a left turn or right turn wherever you're at, you're trying to look both ways, and you can't be looking both ways at the same time. A computer can do that.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
I cycle to work every day, and it's a lot like an extreme sport, like base jumping. It really is. I'm quite aware that I'm literally taking my life in my own hands, just jumping on a bicycle.
You don't have dedicated bike lanes?
We do, yeah.
You don't have dedicated bike lanes there? Yeah.
We
do,
but
you do not have a protective barrier?
No. There's no protective barrier. We do have bike lanes, but not everywhere. I can take some of the journey, about a third of it, I would say, using bike lanes. But quite often the bike lanes are shared by buses. Strangely, it's a bike and bus lane, which is quite ridiculous. But that's the way it is.
In the Netherlands, they constructed their. I was going to say, in the Netherlands, they constructed their bike lanes where there is a large strip of grass between the bike lane, which is also sometimes a pedestrian and stroller lane, and the car lanes and bus lanes. So you have a good, 4 or 5 feet of grass buffer at the very least between you and the actual flow of car traffic. I don't know about where you live there, but I know the Netherlands really thought that through very well. I felt very safe driving there on my bicycle.
I could reach out and touch cars whizzing past me at 60 miles an hour.
Whoa.
When I'm on my bike.
Do bicyclists get regularly injured or killed?
A bit unnerving, but I enjoy it. I get a strange thrill out of traveling to work every day.
Are there accidents between vehicles and bicycles in that area where you commute?
Yeah, definitely.
I know there are in DC. That's the same thing in DC, Adam, that they just built bike lanes in, and at least one of the portions where I was commuting to, down into the Golden Triangle, which is around K Street, L Street, M Street. They took away one of the commuter lanes and put a bike lane in, and put up along intervals of about every 6 feet, they put posts up. And that made a safe environment for the bicyclists. But that's just down there in the Golden Triangle area. Yeah, the rest of the place is, it's white knuckled.
You need the post because, we have bike lanes here in Montgomery County, Maryland, but we have drivers who cannot even stay in one lane consistently. So they're going to stray into the bike lane from time to time because they're texting or they're talking on their phone or they're just clueless.
Taking selfies. I heard that there have been a lot of accidents recently that happen when people are taking selfies while driving.
I believe
See,
it.
with smart cars, that won't happen.
If you've seen an American
Smart
teenager
cars will
lately,
have a
they're taking a selfie probably.
Yeah, some of them are actually taking last selfie in their lives.
True that.
Well.
Yeah.
There's a fascinating documentary about the mayor of Bogota. I don't know if it's the same guy who's still the mayor of Bogota, Colombia, but there was or is a mayor of Bogota that was very committed to both mass transit and to the kind of transit he sees as non-elite. And he has emphasized building, for example, bicycle lanes over car lanes. And they show in the documentary, I'll try to send you a link of it later if I can find it, how there's a rutted mud road for cars in one place in the city, and the bicycles have this great paved area. So a lot of it is a political will to make a change in transportation, and in a poorer country, that's going to go over really well because there's going to be a lot more people riding mass transit or bicycles than there are going to be in individual cars.
Yeah. You know, speaking of that type of thing, I was surprised that the Segway never caught on. You know, I thought that would be something that people would get into, but I used to see a few Segways down in DC, Paul. I see nothing but maybe a couple traffic cops on them.
Yeah,
what happened there?
Well, they're only 11 miles an hour top speed. I mean, you're not going to go any distance on them. A bicycle is much faster.
I've been asking my missus for one of those for Christmas for the past 10 years.
Well,
I'm still waiting.
Well, now there's hoverboards, which are essentially the same thing, but without the big handle, and much cheaper. My son desperately wants one for Christmas.
A hoverboard?
Yeah, they're basically powered skateboards that are self-balancing.
Has a motor?
Yeah,
a motor.
It's like imagine a very small Segway.
Okay.
The problem, but those are never going to be transit method. They're just for getting around short distances. Because. Well,
I always thought at this point in time we should have had our own little hovercraft. I should have been still be able to leave my garage on my little hovercraft, and put it into gear and float above whatever, and then land and be somewhere. That's another thing that I still cannot get over. I know one time, Paul, you told me to get over it. It's not been done, but it still makes me mad that we aren't there yet. What in the hell happened?
Well, that was just the Jetsons that convinced us that we should all have flying cars.
It should have worked.
Well,
I was even seeing, looking back at.
Nobody asked the engineers.
To just
we should
have that.
We kind of have a hovercraft, some kind of hovercraft, because Harrier jet can actually lift, upwards. It doesn't need any space. They actually lift upwards.
Yeah.
The F-35 can also.
The technology is there. But they're like $1 gazillion.
Yeah, well.
My own little hovercraft that, with foot and up I go, and then I just rotate my little round things and float somewhere. I don't know why I should not be able to buy one of those for $32,000.
Well, the classic.
No, they don't even have it yet.
The classic futurist vision of flying cars or hoverboards was not based on any technological ideas. It's basically Aladdin's carpet ride, and there's no mechanism was ever given for it. And hover.
But they have it, Nick.
Well, hovercraft.
It's in the Harrier.
Hovercraft the Harrier and the F-35 rely on ducted downdrafts from their jet turbines, and hovercraft rely on fans pointed downward. The point I'm getting at is the science fiction.
But you can direct these.
Yeah, but it comes with consequences. Like if you've ever walked under the blades of a helicopter, there's a lot of air wash coming out, and hovercraft have air wash, and drones have air wash, and it's the only point I'm trying to make here is that the science fiction image of a flying car never had a mechanism behind it, or if it had a mechanism, it was a made up thing on the moment of anti-gravity devices installed on all four corners or something. So we still don't.
Well, little tiny baby individual helicopters would work, but we don't have that.
Yeah, but once again,
what's up with that?
They come with consequences. It takes a lot of power to turn a rotor blade
also,
for a helicopter.
Helicopters take a lot of skill to fly properly, and you can easily kill yourself. So
that could be taken care of by automation technology.
Well, you also have to. If everybody had one, there would be it would. The problem with anything that's flying above, well above ground is that if there's a failure, you die. So.
Well, yeah, but you have the lift capability of a bladder that has helium in it. So there's your little lift, and then you got these little rotors that don't blow your dogs and cats out of the yard, that are just going to go like that, and it propels you along. You don't have to go 150 miles an hour, but I still cannot get over that. Somewhere something went wrong that we don't have that. I was promised that in Popular Mechanics.
Yeah, well, we always think that what happened is that our mastery of energy is not particularly improved significantly. Our mastery of information has, and back in the 50s they kind of miscalculated how good we'd be at energy versus how good we'd be at information. Energy is a lot harder, and essentially the problem with going at a high altitude, by which I mean anything over 15 feet,
and we don't need to.
Well, but anything off the ground,
that's not high altitude.
It's a lot of energy to expend, and you have to somehow do that at a modest cost, and it's not easy to do.
I remember
excuses.
I remember seeing a man with a jetpack at the opening ceremony of the 1984 Olympics.
Right.
Was it LA?
Yeah, jetpacks are still possible. They're just incredibly inefficient.
Back in 1984, I remember seeing that and thinking, wow, in another 10 years, I could have one of those.
Oh, you could if you were rich and didn't mind just flying for 15 seconds.
Yes.
Jetpacks are kind of a joke. I mean, they don't really, you're going to run out of fuel very quickly.
There were a couple of guys in Dubai who flew with alongside a Dubai big jet.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah, that's essentially a very small airplane strapped to your back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They did it as a stunt, didn't they, just recently?
A bit of a stunt, yeah.
I think they get about 35 minutes out of one of those. I mean, they've got like a big wing on their back, haven't they?
Yeah.
Powered. Basically, a bit like having a microlight plane strapped to your back.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, very soon there's going to be a breakthrough in technology that's going to allow lift capability on light materials that has a power capacity that is going to allow people to float through on these little transport devices. I'd asked earlier if any of you guys, and you're a bunch of geek wonks, you know these things, have you heard of this term called binary power? It's two invisible beams intersecting at a point to create power. Have you heard of that? And this power combined with light materials and frictionless operations is going to transform transportation. Have you heard anything about that, binary power?
No. I haven't.
What do you mean by individual beams?
Beams of what?
Well, I don't know anything. I don't know anything about it. Might be laser. It might be laser.
Well,
but I was reading this
Dark matter?
a futuristic look at this.
dark matter would work.
I don't know.
I've seen a jet engine made out
this
of.
was a group.
Yeah.
I've seen it. Yeah, I've seen a jet engine made out of carbon fiber, and actually, it's a micro. I mean, that jet engine could sit on my thumb, and it works. You just provide fuel.
Whoa.
Whoa. I did talking earlier about building a tube for this. I've seen this really neat stuff. They actually use it. It's been out on the market. I'm going to say at least 10 years. They've been using it all over the world to repair pipe, and it's a carbon fiber, almost like if you do like a fiberglass and a resin, but it's a carbon fiber fabric that then there's a carbon based resin, and they use it to repair pipelines, and it's really neat stuff because the way the guy, and I actually talked to the guy who invented the stuff. He was actually he was doing a demonstration, and they're saying that this stuff is stronger than the pipe that they're putting it on, and if the pipe ever went totally rusted out, you would never know it because this carbon material will hold up, and we're talking oil pipelines. And actually, we're looking at it to use it for to repair conduits. If you ever have experience in a refinery, there's the sulfur units are notorious. They hate it. Sulfur loves to destroy carbon steel, and we were looking at using it to we had pipe or conduits that were coming apart. I mean, literally, they were just disintegrating in front of our eyes, and they wanted to cover it with this stuff because it would hold up to the sulfur mist and stuff like that, and the acids they were using there. So it was really neat stuff.
Mm-hmm. I think the breakthrough there will come. Well, everybody already has these radio controlled drones that were pretty much we had radio controlled planes for many decades, but these little battery powered drones made possible by a tremendous improvement in battery technology, and that's energy storage technology is what's going to make. I mean, you still need a lot of energy to fly, but as you get better and better energy storage technology with ultra capacitors and better chemistries, you will see more things. Probably not humans, but more things flying around battery powered autonomous aerial vehicles, like the Google delivery drones, for example, which not Google, the Amazon delivery drones, I think is what I'm talking about. Yeah, those are coming, and it's made possible by improved energy storage technology. The best energy storage technology we've had for a long time has been gasoline, and that's fading into history, or will soon. So, anyway, before we get, we've been talking for over an hour. I'd like to, and I know some of you, it's getting quite late where you are. So, it's been quite late the whole time. I'd like to do our quick recommendations. We have 5 panelists tonight, so keep it to about 30 seconds. As just like we've done the last 2 episodes, anything could be a website, a book, a movie, music, a blog, whatever it is. Just give us a quick recommendation. If you don't have anything, you can't come up with anything right quickly, just pass, and somebody else will move on to the next one, and I'll have mine as well. So, shall we start with you, Adam?
No. Start with someone else. Give me a moment, please.
Okay. How about you, Marsha?
I don't really have a recommendation, but when I think about the future, I think I've always been very struck by the movie Blade Runner. And to me, that's kind of the future we're going to have. It's going to be similar to that. It's going to be gritty probably, and there's going to be pockets of very high technology and pockets of very low technology. That's kind of how I see things are going to shake out in the future.
Oh, well, that's a good movie. Not a bad recommendation. How about you, Mateusz?
Well, I think all of you guys seen the movie iRobot, but if you didn't, you have to see it because it handles the problem of computers taking over the stuff for us. They're doing everything for us, and it's a bit risky between letting them do too much. And actually, I recommend you guys look to update your information about Tesla because they're doing a lot of work into self-driving cars.
Right. Mike Bohler.
Well, kind of off the top, but I've been heavily promoting a documentary by James Lambert. He did it's called "Conspiracy Theorists Lie." It's a documentary about the Kennedy assassination and how pretty much everything that the conspiracy, those who have promoted a conspiracy, has lied to us. And and his website, nomagicbullets.org, I believe. I don't have the stuff here, but it's No Magic Bullets, where you can download, view the documentary, or you can find it on Amazon, and it's really, I really like it. And actually, pay attention. That he in the final third, he actually confronts people who believe in the conspiracy, and it's priceless seeing the reaction on people's faces when he confronts them. It's a must see.
Okay. Now, what's that again? It's called The Conspiracy Theorists Lie. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nick, how about you? You're muted. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. I would like to recommend a particular blog post that came out, I don't know, a week or two ago. The leak was widely circulated among people interested in space sciences and the like. The blog is called In the Dark, subtitled A Blog About the Universe and All That Surrounds It. The author, I don't know who the author is, but there's a post called Life as a Condition of Cosmology, in which the author gives an exposition of the anthropic cosmological principle in terms of Bayesian probabilities, and it's well worth a read.
Okay. We'll have a link to that in the show notes. My recommendation is going to be a podcast. So far I've done music and a book, so I'll do a podcast this week. The podcast is one you probably haven't heard of. It's called Project Archivist. These folks have good enough taste to have me on for one episode. This is a podcast that looks into some pretty strange things, but they look into it from the point of view of the human angle, and they do not have the usual gullible woo-woo attitude towards these odd occurrences, and they're quite willing to consider that there's a prosaic explanation, but that's not really what interests them. What interests them is that how people behave in the presence of very strange and unusual experiences. And they also have a lot of funny stuff. So I would recommend it. Project Archivist. I'll have a link in the show notes. Okay. Well.
Okay. Can I give you mine now?
Sure, Adam. Your turn.
I would like to recommend anything by Emily Lakdawalla, who is the planetary evangelist for the Planetary Society. And she writes excellent blog posts detailing all the space exploration missions that are going on at the moment. If you want to know what's happening with the Curiosity rover on Mars, or what's happening with the Rosetta mission to the Comet 67P, or the Opportunity rover on Mars, anything like that, New Horizons, Emily writes very clear stuff telling you what's going on with these missions. So go to the Planetary Society's website, which is planetarysociety.org, and take a look at Emily Lakdawalla's blog posts.
Yeah.
They're excellent.
Yeah, I'll second that. Emily does it. If you want to keep up with planetary science, Emily's your go-to person. And she's very knowledgeable and writes very clearly. So yeah. Oh, thank you, Adam. Okay. Well, we had quite a large panel tonight. We talked about transportation. It's been fun. This is the Unseen Podcast. Go to unseenpodcast.com to learn more. We have a list there of all of our episodes. This has been episode 34. And if you would like to be a panelist on the Unseen Podcast, we are an open participation podcast. You go to unseenpodcast.com, you'll learn you can become a panelist. It's not a difficult process. And we typically do record in late evening on the East Coast of the United States on Fridays, but we occasionally do have a different recording date and time. So if you're somewhere in a time zone that doesn't support that, we'll work with you to get you on the show. So you don't need to be a subject matter expert. You just need to have good questions, and we'll talk about all kinds of things. And if you go to our website, you click on episodes, a little page that Mateusz put together, you will see a list of everything we've talked about, and you can get a good idea of the diversity of the topics we cover. We are a spin-off of the Wow Signal podcast, which is a more edited and scripted podcast than this one. Go to wowsignalpodcast.com to learn more. If you want to support the Unseen Podcast, you can go to patreon.com/unseenpodcast and help us there. A very small donation per month would be very much appreciated. We don't want anyone to give us a lot of money, just a little bit of money to help cover our modest costs. So we hope to see you next week. And you can follow us on Twitter. You can also check us out on Google Plus or Reddit. And we have a new listeners community on Google Plus, and there's a link to that at unseenpodcast.com. If you have any questions, comments, criticisms, corrections, by all means, let us know. You can email unseenpodcast@gmail.com, or you can comment on the blog directly at the blog post for this episode or any other episode that interests you. And we will be back. We will not be back next week. Next week, we're taking a week off. Next week is a holiday here in the U.S. And we will be back in December, but not on Friday night. We're recording on a Sunday morning here in the East Coast, U.S. And if you're in Europe or Asia and would like to participate, we're trying to make that a little bit easier for you by having that date and time. So please feel free to join us, and we'll see you on December. Again, the podcast will be on probably about December 6th, episode 35. And December will be a relatively light month for us. We're skipping the last week, and we're also skipping the following week, which is the first week in January. And so, anyway, all that information is unseenpodcast.com. We're on iTunes. We're on lots of other services. So we'll see you then. So this has been episode 34. It's the 20th of November, 2015. See you next week. This is the Unseen Podcast. Goodbye to Adam, Marsha, Mateusz, Mike, and Nick. And music has been by DJ Spooky. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
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 Bye.